Greetings, fellow nappers and sleepers around the world. I am quite excited to be here today for this off the cuff live, uh, talk about why we sleep, how to sleep better, and what else you might want to get and what you can expect to get out of your sleeping. Let me change my volume so that you don't get feedback. You may have to turn this up. My audio settings are not always perfect. Do, do, do. Yep. So, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I'm an investigative journalist. I'm super interested in questions around consciousness and how we can be sort of more fully formed humans in general. And, there are 24 hours in a day, and about 8 hours of every day are spent in bed sleeping. If you're sort of a good, general human, and at the end of the day, you feel tired and, uh, from an evolutionary perspective, from one way to think about it, sleeping actually doesn't seem like such an awesome thing, right? You're defenseless. You're not spending time looking for food. You're not, finding better mating partners. You are basically totally and completely inactive. So why has evolution put made sleeping such a priority? Why is it that we do it in the first place? And why does like every creature, big and small, every large mammal, of course, like you, but also people who, like single cell life forms. Everything has a circadian rhythm, and sleep ends up being vital. Well, one of the most important sleep scientists in the world, had noted many, many years ago that if you don't sleep, sorry, they said that, well, evolution had basically had to have a very, very good reason to put it there because it is, uh, you know, sorry, I was just looking at the chat. Someone wants to do a Mayday video. I don't know what a Mayday video is. Maybe it's like a red alert. Um, but so evolution needs it. Every creature has sleeping. So why? What is its evolutionary role? And then, since we all know that we love sleeping, how can we all learn to sleep better? This is sort of what I want to get into in this YouTube live. Um, the first thing I want to talk about, since I have this book on napping that's coming out soon, can we take better naps? Can we get into the short sleep phase and recover more quickly and become sort of better people? Well, the reason why napping is important is because sleep, provides many restorative things in our brains, in our minds. It optimizes our immune system. During the day, you're sort of always active, and you're taking a toll out of unconscious processes in your bodies. When consciousness takes a ton of energy. When you're asleep, one of the things that's going on is you're able to move the energy that you're using in like sort of like focused, aware consciousness into broader things in the body where your brain starts sort of assembling and recreating and sort of managing the damage that you've done to yourself while being awake. Most of us don't get great sleep in the modern world, and that's because we are driven to work. We are driven to optimize ourselves. We're driven to find sex partners and entertain ourselves and all these things. And we usually take there's only 24 hours in a day, and you usually uh, pay for all of that sort of focused awareness out of your sleep. Now, naps are great because you can use them to sort of like make up for the missed sleep that you might have had during the day. And it's actually more efficient to nap than it is to just do 8 hours of sleep at night and then, be awake for the rest of the day. Humans throughout the world, if we look at sort of the, tribes people, if we look at people who are, um, sort of as close to indigenous as we get, what we see is that they have polyphasic sleep, which means they have many modes of sleep throughout the day. You usually will sleep from let's say 8 p.m. to about midnight, be awake for a couple hours, go back to sleep. And then in the middle of the day, around 3 p.m., they sleep again for like an hour. This is what the normal human sleep pattern is. Unfortunately, for us who have grown up in the modern world, um, when Thomas Edison, when he created the electric light bulb, Edison was known for biologically not needing as much sleep as other people. He actually wrote repeatedly how much he hated sleep and thought people who napped were lazy. And he invented the electric light bulb, which actually extended the daylight hours for all people. And humans across the world, once they got the electric light bulb, lost an average of an hour of sleep per day, right across the board. That's actually been evolutionarily new and evolutionarily bad for all humans from a physiological level. From an economic level, maybe was decent, which is why I suggest that all of us should nap frequently. Whenever you want, try to break yourself away from the 9 to 5. And because of COVID, lots of us are working from home. So it's actually pretty easy right now in this historical moment to fight back against office labor. And what I suggest is you should nap regularly. You should nap when you feel like it. Oftentimes 2 to 3 p.m. is a great time to nap. If you wake up at, say, 7, 8 in the morning, 6, 7, 8 in the morning, aim for around 1 to 3 in the afternoon for a 30 to an hour long nap. Your life will be better and you'll also be more productive. This is because naturally around that time, it's about 10 hours after you wake up, your melatonin drops and everyone gets groggy. And you look at your computer and you're like, I can't do this anymore. And you sort of want to pass right out. Most people don't, they push through, and that ends up being pretty bad, right? That ends up being pretty bad for you because your work isn't good. You're not very creative. You're sort of sluggish. You have something called sleep inertia that builds up, and it's much better to spend 15 minutes with your eyes closed, even if you don't fall asleep, even if you just try to like relax and space out. It's actually more optimal to do that than it is to sort of push through and do suboptimal work. Naturally, when you're sleepy, sleepiness is very distracting, and it means that you generally make mistakes. If you're in a frontline job, say like a doctor or a police officer, sleeping correlates with people having a lot of damage and doing bad things, making mistakes, horrible stuff. Um, there has been some research on napping that correlates it with negative outcomes. Over the years, there have been sort of long-term big sleep studies that suggest that nappers, people who nap a lot, die earlier and get more Alzheimer's. That's sort of like people have heard about this and have talked about this for a while. It's sort of the anti-nap crowd. The thing is that research that has existed over the years is probably not very good because it also the statistic is very huge and blunt. And the reason why these articles have come out and suggested that napping is bad is because they also group in people who are chronically depressed, people who are like incredibly ill at the end of their lives, and they nap a lot because they're just trying to recover. And that research is not very good. If you're actually in reasonably good health and you nap, it's probably going to make your life better. It's going to supercharge you. It's going to recharge you. So, in my book, which is currently called A Time to Nap, what I say is when you're feeling sleepy, when you're feeling a little rundown, you should get out there and take a nap. Uh, like, don't even, like, try to optimize it. Don't say, like, "I need a nap for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or 100 minutes," or whatever. If you just try to get out there and just do what your body wants, you're listening to yourself, your life will get a little bit better. Um, okay, but many of you are probably they also wanna know, how do is there a technique that I can use to sleep more efficiently in order to fall asleep better and quickly? Because most people will say, "Look, I want to sleep, but it's hard for me to actually fall asleep." And I have been chewing on this question for a little while, and actually, all sleep scientists out there chew on this question because everyone wants a magic pill or a magic bullet to, um, fall asleep really quickly. And I thought, because I'm so brilliant, that I could devise a way, like a sneaky way to use the concepts in my book, The Wedge, to make someone fall asleep quickly. And here's the experiment that I ran on about 50 people a few months ago. Here's what it was. What I suggested is that you could create a pill, like take a supplement that doesn't really do anything in particular except give you a sensation. And there's a couple of these that are sort of well known, niacin 5-HTP. What else did I magnesium. There's a couple that give you some sort of very mild sensations that your body can detect. And I figured that if you are going to bed normally and you're really tired at, like, say, 10 p.m., you have a long day, and you took this pill right before you fell asleep, your body would get a sensation in it. Not a sensation that would make you sleep. Not something like an Ambien that actually makes you sort of fall unconscious, but like, so just a sensation in your body. And I thought that if you could pair that pill, the sensation from the pill, with the act and the feeling of falling asleep, that we could create a sort of what they call a second line association, so that as you are falling asleep that night, your body would unconsciously associate the sensation from that pill with sleeping. And then in the future, when you wanted to take a nap or you wanted to fall asleep in general, you could take that pill and your brain would remember the association and put you to sleep quicker. It was, I thought, a pretty cool idea to test. And I tested, I think, 5 different supplements. We call these things active placebos. And I got my research back after like 2 months of, like, lots of questionnaires and really good feedback from the crowd, and I found that it didn't work. Okay, I found that people, would do research on these placebos that I would give to people, and they were like, "Oh," they would do their own research, and doing their own research gave them associations, with that pill that weren't the ones that I was hoping they would get, and, like, honestly, the experiment was a complete failure, and I had to sort of like rethink some chapters in the book, which is, still going to come out reasonably soon. But it did make me rethink how I wanted to work with placebos and work to create a technique to help you fall asleep. And here's where I am right now. Let's say you're in bed and it's nighttime. There is this stage of sleep. Sleep comes into 4 or 5 different stages, depending what sleep scientist you're talking to. And the first stage, stage one sleep, is called hypnagogia or hypnagogia, depending how you want to pronounce it. And it is that moment where right now I'm alert, and then there's a time I close my eyes and I'm sort of drifting off. It's like a 7-minute period, 7 to 15-minute period in sleep, where sleep researchers sort of identify this intermediary stage. Now, it is the gateway to all of the restorative sleep that might come down the line. And the way I have where I am now, when I want to give somebody advice for how to get through stage one sleep into stage two sleep, and then all of the sleeps beyond that, and every stage does a different thing mentally for you and physiologically and immune optimizationally, that's a word, way. What you do is think of that dozing off period as a sort of journey. Think of dozing off as a story that you're telling yourself. This is actually really useful because we're sort of like urging you into that dream state, into that period where you're making associations that are not the focused, aware associations that we make all day, but just sort of loose wandering. Instead of like musing over the problems that you had today, oh my God, I got in a fight with somebody on YouTube. Oh my God, that my taxes are due, or something like that. Instead, let your brain make free associations and think of yourself that you're going somewhere. Um, I was talking with somebody the other day, and he was like, "Yeah, sometimes I'll think of myself on a path, and I'll see an animal on the path, and I'll follow the animal, and the animal leads me to a clearing, and onwards and onwards, and just let your brain follow a story that you're making up." This is sort of like forcing yourself into a dream, and believe it or not, as you're on that journey, it will lead you into unconsciousness. Another way that you can do this, depending on what sort of person you are, is if you close your eyes. This is a meditation that I learned in India many, many years ago, and it's super simple. If you close your eyes, you will see a blackness. Maybe there are some flecks of red and blue, depending on what your rods and cones are doing. But there is this space between your eyes. And think of yourself as moving forward into that space, as if that space is the journey itself. Now, these are basically two different techniques that are the same technique in a way. Instead of saying, "I see a fox and I do this," this is more for people who are more visually oriented. Close your eyes and move your brain, your mind, not your brain, your mind into that space and follow it wherever it leads you. It could be colors you will end up seeing, but the more visually engaged you are, this leads you on this journey and it will help put you to sleep. And the reason why these two things work is because what we're trying to do is break associations with your day that you just had. We're trying to break the associations of life, um, and all of the meandering that you've done during the day, and instead we're trying to direct you in the direction of actually falling asleep. Another thing that you can do, if you followed this channel for a little bit, I have a script called Yoga Nidra, and you can also just Google Yoga Nidra. And what that is would be a audio playlist or just sort of MP3 that plays, and it is a person guiding you through the stages of sleep. Uh, and all you need to do is listen to the audio cues that someone gives. Super simple. Um, these things have been refined over many, many years. Go just check out Yoga Nidra. Just Google that. I have one, other people have them. Go check out Yoga Nidra, and it is an easy way to have an external prompt force you in to sleeping. All right, the next topic that I wanted to talk to you about is why we dream at all in the first place. Okay, so this is sort of the question I began with up top in the very beginning. Again, evolutionarily, sleeping doesn't make a lot of sense, right? You're defenseless. It's time you're not spent doing other things. So why do basically all creatures have some aspect of dreaming in their daily circadian rhythms? Well, this actually dovetails with uh, a thing that was missing in my book, The Wedge. Now, in The Wedge, I talked about a concept called neurosymbols, where I said that when you engage with the world, you take sensory information from the world and it combines with your emotional state at that moment. And then that combination of the two things is what, forms the bits and bytes of consciousness. But what was never really truly well explained in The Wedge was where emotions come from in the first place. And I was a little bit at a loss to understand where how they showed up. My research into dreaming has sort of answered that question for me, because dreams are the forge of emotions. Throughout the day, you go on living and your senses collect a ton of information. You're looking at me on YouTube right now, you're talking to me, blah blah blah. I'm talking to you, and some of these words will resonate with you and other words will just sort of just just fly by, and you won't really need them later, right? You might see these books on the shelves by me, you might see the broader area around your computer or your phone or your TV, wherever you're watching this. You might hear a truck go, bump down the road. All of that sensory information is actually recorded in your brain in the equivalent of RAM, right? Like a computer's short-term memory. And if we had remembered everything that's ever happened to us, you would get overloaded. You would have way too much information to deal with, uh, and it would make it impossible to make it through life. So what dreams actually do, and what one of the functions of sleep is to take all of that sensory information you had during the day and discard it so that you don't fill up your brain with information that you don't actually want to use. And this is what happens in dreaming. You know how you have all of these, like, they can be bizarre, right? You know, they sort of have dreams have some sort of relation to what you were talking about. Maybe you remember a dream the other day, and you were talking about climate change, and you had a dream about a flood, right? Or you talked about a flood, and some element of the flood replays in your conscious experience, and somehow you remembered that when you woke up. Well, what dreams do is try to take the most salient moments of your day and the stuff that actually is important and condense it into a gist, just a gist of all of the stuff. And that gist is an emotion. And most of us, when we walk through the world, we like to think that we're rational. But the reality is when we walk through the world, we make emotional calculations because emotions are sort of predictors of how we should act in the world. Like you see someone across the street, you don't think, well, is that person a danger or not? And you run through all the rational things. Do they have a gun? Blah, 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 but are they, wearing clothes that would indicate that these person might be a danger or whatever it is? Instead, you just have an emotional feeling, an emotional reaction. That all gets forged in dreams. And so what the dreams do when you're in that REM state, you take all of the salient information and you condense it into the gist and you discard everything else. And that gist is then stored in your brain. And that's what dreams, that is one of the main functions of the act of dreaming. And here's where it starts to get really cool and where it connects to some of the stuff that I was talking about at the top of this video. Once we understand that dreams create emotions, can you decide what emotions you want to create? Can you sort of force a dream into happening? And this has been the question that scientists have been asking at least since the 80s. And and we know, for instance, that if you let's say you're learning a foreign language, this is sort of a well-known sleep research thing. Let's say you want to learn a foreign language and you've been studying Spanish throughout the week, throughout your, months. If you have a dream in Spanish the night before, say, a Spanish language test, you will perform better on that language test because in that when you're creating these gists of memories, uh, if you can dream about it, you will do better. It also interestingly works for athletic performance because there's a whole motor side of dreaming that I'm not really going to get into too much. But if you say, let's say you're studying karate, right? And then you dreamed about some sort of move that you were working on, you would actually perform that move better when you're actually, trying to in your karate match, your Karate Kid moment. Uh, Sorry, my cat wants to get out. One moment. All right, cat, move it. Go dream. Okay. So is there a way to, say, trigger a dream? And the research that has been going on about this for, again, since the 1980s. People tried to, like, play books on tapes as they dream, people have tried various sort of neurostim ways to sort of trigger a dream, and the results have been somewhat inconclusive because, cognitive sciences are not very good at sort of creating subjective experiences is what happens in a dream. However, there was recent research out of MIT, a guy named Adam Horowitz at the MIT Media Lab, which had this really interesting thing. What they did is drawing on sort of ancient ritual techniques from like sort of the oracles at Delphi and in Egypt, as well as sort of the dream states, uh, sort of like more structured dreaming in Aboriginal cultures around the world. What they decided to do was create a ritual moment before you fall asleep, and then use some sort of high tech devices that detect various sleep stages as they occur. And what you would do is you would say, look, let's say I wanted to dream about Spanish. I would take their device and I would record a prompt into a language device. And I would be like, hablas español, ¿dónde está la playa? These sort of like Spanish things. I don't actually know Spanish very well. I should have used a language I know, like Hindi. But anyway, you say some stuff in Spanish, and then what it will do is we'll play, and you set your intention. You say, I want to dream in Spanish. And you say, I want to dream in Spanish into this recording device, and it records a little tiny MP3. Then, as you enter into the stages of sleep that you want, such as REM, where you might be sort of like forging Spanish memories that will be useful for you in the future, it will play that audio prompt, and there's a 97% chance that you incubate a dream in Spanish, which means then you'll have memory optimization on the outlet. Now, the dissertation written by Adam Horowitz is a fascinating 300-page read, and the I wouldn't say the science is complete on it, but it is amazing. And I've been trying to create a device for the last several months, trying to create a device that will allow you to do this. And we are, because you know getting the blueprints and figuring out how it will work. It seems like Adam Horowitz is no longer actually actively working on this research, but is actually doing some other stuff. So it's been a little bit difficult. But for the last few months, I've been working with sort of a device designer to take the device that Adam had posted on the internet and sort of optimizing it and making it better. And I'm going to be testing it soon. And that's going to go into the napping book. And perhaps this is something that you will be able to do as well. However, even if you don't have the device, what you can do is you can set your intention before you fall asleep, do those techniques, thinking of sleep as a journey, and that will also sort of bring you into the ability to make gists. Okay, so that was really all I wanted to talk about right now on sleep optimization. This is sort of like my stream of consciousness. And now I want to take questions from the comments, which I have not even looked at yet. And it looks like there's quite a few. Uh, Whoa. Okay. So one person said, I have sleep paralysis, night terrors, and insomnia. And I realized the fear of having an episode of paralysis and night terrors was the cause of my insomnia. So night terrors are really terrible. Okay. So what they are is as you fall into REM, your brain does something really, really interesting. So when you're unconscious, your brain is taking information from the world and making these gists, but you're actually reliving experiences. Your brain actually feels like it's in a real conscious environment. And in a way, you could say that dreaming is the purest state of consciousness in the world, because normally when you're walking around the world, information's coming in from your sensory system. And then what your brain does is creates a model of the world and then experiences the world through the model it creates. Not a direct experience of the world itself, but actually through the model that it creates. And it's always getting feedback from the outside world. Now, in a dream state, it's not getting that feedback, not that information from the outside world. It's just looking at the model, which is in a way the truest form of consciousness. And when you're in that state, what your brain does, this is fascinating. Your brain sends out a signal to all of your motor neurons and says, "Turn off." You're going to be in a conscious world that I'm creating, the simulation world. And when you're in that world, your muscles cannot move. It also stops the production of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And so in a dream state, you cannot experience stress in the way you think about it in the real world. And when you're awake, you shut off your cortisol production, and you cannot move while you're dreaming. Now, sleep paralysis is a sort of a dysfunction where you wake up because your brain has already said, "Hey, motor neurons, don't move," and you wake up and you become aware, and you physically cannot move because your brain still thinks you're dreaming. Then I believe you do actually dump cortisol, because it is very, very stressful. And in order to combat that experience, there's two things you need to do, right? One is to realize and tell yourself you are experiencing sleep paralysis. You literally cannot move your body. You might feel like you're underwater, right? You're like it might literally feel like, oh God, I'm underwater. Oh no, ads are gonna jump in. I'm gonna skip the ads this time. Skip ads. You get to listen to me with no ads. Um, you feel like you're underwater, and it's like hard to get up. What you need to do mentally is say, you need to name it. You need to say, look, I am in sleep paralysis right now. I do not have the only thing I have control of is the breath, because usually you do still have control of your breath, and you want to slow your breath down. That will help you with the anxiety of that experience of being in sleep paralysis, and the sleep paralysis will eventually go away. Now, if that is not enough for you, you may want to talk to a sleep doctor, because there are other ways that they can trigger and help you get out of sleep problems. But it is the anxiety that you attach to sleep paralysis that makes things awful. Um, all right. So that was the sleep paralysis thing. I've looked through these comments, and it's really Sandy and Miss Susie who are talking the most. David Wolf just came into the chat. If you guys have any more sleep questions, please ask them now. Because the sleep paralysis one was really good. Otherwise, I think that we may have completed this Instagram Live. Um, Again, if you have been following my channel for a while, and you know what I do, I'm trying to get out of being just the Wim Hof drowning channel, since I do some stuff about Wim Hof drowning and all that stuff. I want to be able to have these sort of broad interest, and I'm really happy that you guys are here. I'd also like to consider listening to my I have a Patreon where you can sort of help make my stuff, appear on the internet. You get sort of early access into some of the work that I do. There's a link down there to help support me, and also, be part of an awesome community of patrons. And, I'm on Discord all day, and you can also talk to me on Discord there. So go check that out down there. The other thing is I have a podcast called Carney Investigates. Please go check that out, because I will, for the more well-produced videos, I have one about psychedelics that I'm gonna be doing, this afternoon. That will show up first in my podcast feed before I put it here on YouTube. So, I wanna say thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to end this stream. Go check out some of my more highly produced things, and, yeah, aloha.